Boy night, we meet tonight for a podcast.
I might keep that in.
That is fine.
This is Viktor Devonne, and you are listening to WEBurlesque, a podcast about nightlife people talking to burlesquers and cabareters and drag professionals who are going through their stuff on stage and off stage. I've often said that burlesque is an intersection between entertainment and catharsis. And our next guest is someone who not only finds ways to entertain and be cathartic, but also be super nostalgic and embrace nostalgia openly and unabashedly. And that is the producer of D20 Burlesque, the dicey dame herself, Anja Keister.
It's me, Anja Keister.
Hello. It is January 30th. We are recording in the fabulous borough of Brooklyn. It is chillier out than it has been previously, but it's mostly a wind situation. But we are cozy, surrounded by nerdy things, and that is super appropriate because, Anja Keister, you have recently won a title.
At your awards
show. At my awards show.
Oh, how interesting of you to bring that up.
I know. It was going to happen one way or another. It might as well happen in the first 3 minutes. Geek of All Media.
Yes.
That is a shared title with Femme Appeal of Kitty Knights and the larger New York nerdlesque scene. You, however, represent sort of a more graphic novel, comic book, anime area of Geek of All Media, I would say more predominantly than Femme because she's more movie-oriented.
Maybe. I mean, Femme is a pretty big comic book person, too.
Yes, but I would say her acts, I think most people are going to think of her film work,
yes.
Either in horror films especially.
Yes. My nerdery is widespread with some very big potholes in it.
Mm-hmm.
I started D20 Burlesque because I really liked gaming, and for me, gaming was actually like board gaming and tabletop, your Dungeons and Dragons sort of thing. And then my partner, she is more of a video game person, so we're like, we're gonna start this. It's going to be gamer themed. And that was where we went. Because at the time when we got started, Epic Win was still around.
Okay. And
they were doing more comic books. They were doing Star Wars and Star Trek. They were doing all that stuff. And
around what year did D20?
2010,
okay.
I want to say, is when I got started. I think towards the end of 2010 is when I started to put it in. And I think 2011, I want to say March of 2011 is when we had our first show.
Well, I mean, that seems evident by especially the name. Obviously, it's an item for those who are not familiar. A D20 is a 20-sided dice that helps figure out you and the game master how successful you are at a roll. And a natural 20 is sort of like liquid luck. It's sort of the best case scenario where if you have to fight an ogre and a 6 would at least get you out and safe, 20 he falls over on his feet and vaporizes.
Yes.
It's now admittedly though D20 by inherently is not automatically lucky.
It's not, but it was when we were trying to come up with what we wanted the show and now brand to be. We figured a D20 was a thing that if you know what it is, you know what it is. Mm-hmm. If you don't, it's just a name. It's just a number.
It also shows that there are that many sides, perhaps, to a fandom or to a nerdlesque show.
Let's go with that.
Absolutely.
Very metaphorical.
Don't you worry. I will find a way.
But yeah, so when we got started, for the first year or so, we just really did gaming stuff.
Okay. What was your first show? Do you remember?
First one was fantasy, so it was namesake, kind of like role-playing games, fantasy stuff like that. I want to say the second show was board games. The third show, I think, was video games. The fourth show, I think, was computer games, because we were nerdy enough to
separate the two.
Yes. And then we kind of went, I think we got, Lovecraft in there the first year. So we kind of stuck around that, and then as Epic Win sort of teetered out, we filled in and started doing
More general.
More general and wider themes of kind of nerdy stuff. But in the beginning, I very, very much wanted people to know that
I would say,
gaming, we're
I
separate.
think what's interesting, especially about D20, and this is my perspective, is that I didn't come up knowing the term nerdlesque, and I didn't come up knowing... I thought you just dressed up as that character, which was then later I heard as cosplay, especially through Cosplay Burlesque and other cosplayers who would then put on shows, which of course is not the same thing per se as nerdlesque, and it's not even necessarily the same thing as fandom. And I would actually put your show as you're a fandom show with nerdlesque acts. Because you have the general purpose fandom. You don't usually do you'll do like the works of Stephen King and the works of H.P. Lovecraft, but you won't do X-Men. You won't do only X-Men. You'll do Marvel. You'll generalize it to an extent.
Yes.
To allow different interpretations of that fandom and that geekery inherent.
Yeah, definitely for some. Every now and then we will do some more specific things, but typically when we're doing something more specific, it's because I reached out to the creator and got their approval, and that was after getting a cease and desist. So
how do you maneuver being one of the more visible brands of nerdlesque in New York City and taking on intellectual property? But do you ever feel like, well, maybe they're not my characters to work with, if that's a possibility?
I don't think so that much, and that kind of goes down to my deeper belief about why nerdlesque is important. I think we were a little bit more brash in the beginning, and then it was after getting a cease and desist for doing a show on Cartoon Network about a boy and a dog.
Oh.
After getting that cease and desist and having to take it very seriously, because to this day we're pretty certain a lawyer did show up.
Okay.
A man in a suit walked into a burlesque show, sat in the back row, took out a notepad, and then at the end of the show, didn't applaud once, according to my partner who worked the door, and at the end of the show got up and walked out.
I have to wonder if not only maybe they weren't even a lawyer, they were someone who was looking to see what you were doing so that they can then do their own version of it and capitalize on sort of the highs and the high points of it.
I mean, maybe they were just researching. I mean, the company that sent the cease and desist is located in New York City.
Okay.
So...
Well, I figure because every once in a while, I know that we have some colleagues who work in larger budget productions of nerdlesque themed, and almost to the point where they're not quite nerdlesque shows, they're more tribute shows, which I think is again another animal, because then you're not necessarily putting your spin on it, you're making sure that it's as reverent as possible to the original media, and Star Wars is one of those. I think it's one of those major. Now obviously for decades probably there were Star Wars shows, now there are official Star Wars shows to that end. Do you feel that there is a possibility that every media that you work with has at least the potential of being on the same level as a Broadway show, or do you just try to work on a smaller scale?
I try to work on a smaller scale. I like the intimacy of it. And to kind of return to what you were saying before, after getting the cease and desist, that's why we started doing more general things, because we thought, we're just this small burlesque show in a New York theater in the back of a bar. Nothing's gonna happen. This is a thing. We felt small. And so getting a cease and desist had the silver lining of being well, maybe we're a bigger deal than we thought we were. Enough that a major company has sent us a cease and desist. So now we try to be really careful.
Especially now that the internet makes it so easy for all they have to do is have a Google alert for their property.
Exactly. And the thing that gets tricky in regards to nerdlesque is that they can sue you for intellectual property stuff, but I don't remember the exact naming of it, but there's another one which is called corruption of childhood property. Yeah, so in our case, they said, like, not only was it using intellectual property, is because we were taking their intellectual property that was meant for children and corrupting it.
And making it for adults.
Doing a burlesque show about it, yeah.
Wow.
So it was like a double cease and desist.
Because that's almost... Because, I mean, there's been Dirty Mickey Mouse almost as long as there's been actual Mickey Mouse. So, I mean, that's where, like, Fritz the Cat comes from and everything, and the dirtier Betty Boop style. So it's sort of interesting. I mean, it makes sense that because of Fritz the Cat and such, that would eventually happen. But it seems almost impossible to remove it from parody. But...
yeah, it's tricky, and it's kind of frustrating for me because after getting that, I'm just hyper aware. So whenever I see somebody promoting an event and they just, like, take a screen grab from the show and do it, like, my skin just crawls, because I'm just like, part of it is, like, jealousy, because it's like, I can never do that, because I don't know, like, what things I'm tagged on now, that, like, are these companies just gonna always be looking for it?
What list are you on?
Exactly. Yeah. Like, I checked the wrong books out of the library, and now I'm forever on this list. For children out there, there's these things called libraries, where you go and you get paper books. I guess I could say your search history. It's like going to the wrong website. We're the same age, so we'll get the same references. But no, so it's a lot of stuff like that, where even, like, the poster, which Victor can see if he turns around, up in the corner there, we commissioned artist Fyodor Pavlov to create a poster for it, thinking, oh, this is an artist rendition of these things, but because it includes 2 characters that have, or 3 that weren't really changed, they also said, like, we had to cancel the poster, we had to cancel the show, we had to do all of that. It falls under parody, but the problem is that to defend yourself for that, you have to go to court.
Right. And that's what they're counting on. They're counting on you to tire yourself out, basically.
Yeah, they're a major company that can do it. So it's tricky, but I mean, doing wider things is also, I think, out of necessity after doing the show for so many years. Like, it's hard to get a very specific thing. If I was, like, in all... I mean, X-Men I could probably do. There's been X-Men shows in New York. There's X-Men shows all over.
I think when it also comes to, and this isn't, and we can get into this, sort of one of the problematic sides, perhaps, of fandoms, is that a lot of times they were created by cisgender white men who didn't necessarily look at diversity as a strength. So if you have a fandom-related show where it's just one specific series or item or what have you, then there's maybe like one person of color in that whole thing.
Sure.
And that sort of goes against a lot of, I know, your principles as a producer for representation and also against your audiences. Because we're at a point, I would say, where a nerd culture, whatever that ends up meaning, is more diverse than ever, to the point where we had to define pejorative ways to argue against them.
Sure.
Today was called a social justice warrior with spite in their voice. Oh. Yeah. I won't get into the specifics of it because it was frustrating. But somebody made a flippant, I will say, reference to suicide. And sort of made it in a term that's taking the easy way out, or what have you.
Oh.
And I said, maybe not consider that that's an easy choice for anybody, and that anybody who sees that's sort of fucked up.
Yeah.
And their response is, well, obviously I was talking about this one specific situation where I don't have any sympathy for them. Like, that's great, but the person that you're calling out is dead.
Yeah.
They can't see that and say, yeah, you're right, I was being, yeah. So, and then I was called a social justice warrior. I did not get called that. I was not told that I was triggered. But, so I didn't get a full bingo.
Or a snowflake.
Or I did not get called a snowflake either.
It's snowing outside, like how obvious.
It's a little. Although the internet, because he could have been like in San Diego,
That's
though.
True.
He could have been
That's
literally
true.
anywhere. So, how do you sort of come to terms with some of the more problematic sides of not just fandoms, but the things that we like that are especially nostalgia oriented?
Yeah.
They come from a time that sucked.
Yeah.
And they reflect the mores that sucked. How do you put that all together?
It's tricky and it's hard because, like, for example, you talked about the diversity of it. Enjoying the tentacle, pint glasses.
Yeah, I'm enjoying a seltzer water in Anja's company, and her glassware has tentacles.
Glass-edged tentacles. Always on brand.
Not unlike an octopus. So yes, go ahead.
Back to the serious topic. No, like for an example, like our Whedon tribute shows that we do, we're always really tricky because there's not, a wide breadth of diversity in a lot of the Whedon properties, and you don't want to also tokenize a person to be like, oh hey, there's that one black character.
You should identify as them and want to make a costume and come up with something. Yeah.
So it's hard. And then for the wider scheme of things, like, okay, so for example, a more controversial one over the past 2 years, I'd say, is our Lovecraft tributes. Right. And, an amazing performer, Maki Roll, out of DC, made a comment that was saying, like, I don't get why we are celebrating him, like, he's racist, now is not the time for us to be paying tribute to racists. And I totally get it, and I had a conversation with her, and, it's hard for myself, I'm a white woman, everything Maki said was completely true, and in those cases, like, we still did the Lovecraft show, but what I did was I opened it up and I made it not just about Lovecraft, it was Lovecraft and Stephen King.
Who I'm sure is also problematic. I just can't think. Actually, no, I can think. He always has the black character that solves everything.
Okay.
He does have that.
And he's also, a lot of his characters are very misogynistic.
There's that.
But it's like, he's better than Lovecraft. But it's really, it was a difficult conversation. We still had the show. And I feel like Maki's 100% correct with what she's saying. Yeah. We're living in a climate where there are actual Nazis walking around. Like, why do we need to honor a racist?
Someone who wasn't so quiet about it.
Yeah, and there's, the tricky thing about it is that it gets into that age-old debate of, like, can you separate the art from the person? And it's Lovecraft, although not an amazing writer, the concepts and creations he came up with have a long-lasting effect on horror and like sci-fi and
for our listeners who may know the name Lovecraft or don't, can you give me an example of
like H.P. Lovecraft's works deal with I actually spoke at colleges about this. He is considered one of the first people to create cosmic horror, which is the idea that it's not monsters among us or anything like that, but it's rather that human life is so insignificant because we're just one small planet in a world of much larger gods or aliens or whatever you want to call them, that at their own whim could just annihilate all human life because we're so insignificant and we don't matter. So it's a little bit of psychological horror mixed with like monster or unknown horror.
Gothic horror in there.
Gothic horror, yeah. So, like, his works can be seen in a lot of, like, Guillermo del Toro's stuff. Mm-hmm. His influences can be seen in John Carpenter's works. Like, there's a lot of things where this concept has come along. I mean, Prometheus, like, all of these stuff.
He's sort of like the written word of H.R. Geiger.
Yeah,
it's very similar.
So, like, H.P. Lovecraft's, effects are long-lasting, and he was a really horrible person. But he came back into vogue, if you will, in, like, the late 80s, early 90s, when his works were picked up by the gaming world. Right. And
probably the most famous is Call of Cthulhu.
Call of Cthulhu, yeah. The role-playing game system, and then, like, Arkham Horror, and now there's just a whole kind of slew of, like, Lovecraftian role-playing game.
Did he invent the word Arkham? So even that has lasting effects in the Batman universe.
Batman world, yeah. Exactly, so it's all these touchstones. So whenever we do our Lovecraft show, I've hosted it the last 4 times we've done it. Mm-hmm. I make a really valid point to say we are not here to celebrate H.P. Lovecraft. We're here to celebrate the impact that his works have had, and we're reclaiming them. Mm-hmm. And an artist who I think, whenever somebody brings this up, I say you should talk to Nyx Nocturne. because they have a very powerful meaning behind the one act that they do, which is a creature that has a slur in their name.
Right. She's the black goat from the wood, the mother goat from the woods.
Yeah, black goat of the woods. There's another name.
I pronounce it Shubnagroth. I usually give it that, but for our listeners, it is actually more phonetically slurry.
Yeah. But Nyx, they do an act as that character, and when I retired my act after seeing there, because I was like, you have more ownership of this because you were reclaiming it, and that's what they said. They said that, this is kind of like an FU to Lovecraft, that I am this gender queer or gender neutral person of color who is taking off their clothes on stage, doing this and taking your character and making it my own. So it becomes subversive, but I also see the other hand of it where people are like, okay, but this is still like you're bringing up his name.
Right. I mean, we pick and choose.
Yeah.
We are. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of part of being aware of what's up, it gives us permission, self-permission, and privilege to decide who's problematic enough for us to complain about. Because we choose, it's easy for us to say, oh, well, this actor who just made headlines for being problematic, dead to me. Oh, but I really like that movie from the 80s, and I don't want that to be problematic.
Yeah. And a lot of the stuff is unfortunately very problematic.
Well, especially from the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
A lot of things have not aged well.
Yeah, I run a 90s trivia night, and so I go back and I digest a lot of 90s media to prepare for it, and there's a lot of moments of like, there's another thing.
Yeah.
That's really unfortunate.
Yeah. I had forgotten how much men in dresses are funny tropes are in them. But what's interesting is I also have to then say, but they helped shape me in a weird way, in a way that I can't say makes them inherently, I mean, I guess that's the word. That's why the word is problematic and not just strictly awful.
Yeah.
It's problematic. Problematic, I think, by definition, doesn't have to mean automatically without value or without substance or without worth of discussion.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we're both come from a background of Rocky Horror.
We do.
You more than me. I was just a kid whose parents let them watch it when they were 5 and didn't realize what the movie was about until I was much older. But like, there's parts of Rocky that like there's songs that I don't feel okay singing anymore because of terminology used.
Right.
But like, did that shape me? Yeah. Did it have a long lasting effect on me? Yes.
I think we can also. I mean, it's hard.
Yeah.
And I'm not always great at it, but I think we can also say, yes, that shaped me, but that doesn't have to shape what's forward.
Yes. There's, I wish I could remember the exact quote, but Anita Sarkeesian, the woman behind Feminist Frequency,
okay,
if you're aware of it, she starts when that old chestnut of her Feminist Frequency gaming, feminism and gaming, one that like got her death threats and like all that other stuff. She starts.
Was that Gamergate?
It wasn't Gamergate, but it was adjacent to Gamergate, where she did a Kickstarter to raise money. So Feminist Frequency was a YouTube channel where she would critique pop culture with feminist things, right? And then she did a Kickstarter to raise money to do it about video games and made a bunch of money. And then there's just a huge backlash of like the Gamergate community where like multiple death threats, she had to cancel events, people sending stuff to her house, people created video games where they just beat her up, like horrific stuff. But she started every episode of that series by saying that, once again, I don't know the exact quote, but saying like, you can like a media that's problematic as long as you can acknowledge the fact that it's problematic.
Right.
And and I would say the extra part is like, and you're taking steps to point that out so people don't think it's okay.
Right. I mean, I think very often I will watch a movie or a television show and I will see a character who is, I don't want to say devoid of humanity, but they are definitely on the outskirts of acceptable behavior. And that doesn't mean that they are representing something that you want to attain or something that you want to be. But you can really appreciate the storytelling behind it and the acting, if that's an element of it, or the way that it's shot or anything like that. I think that without giving spoilers away, an example of that might be something like Gone Girl, where this unreliable narrator makes horrible decisions, but very effective decisions where I'll speak for myself, where I am very torn at certain places how comfortable I am rooting for her. But I do. And yet I'm also able to say, but I'm able to root for her because she's not in my life.
Sure.
She's not an actual person in my life. Does she reflect the worst and other elements in people that I know or that I have potential of knowing? Sure.
Yeah.
But I think we also have to sometimes accept that it's entertainment.
Yes.
It's a reflection and a commentary, but it's also entertainment.
Yes, and I think that's the power behind fandom. But when you were talking about problematic too, I mean, a thing to keep in mind is someone who's very close to me who's trans, every time we'll be watching something and a joke will come up that's trans-misogynistic or transphobic, I'll like cringe and I'll be like, ugh, should I turn this off? Do you not want to watch this? And she'll be like, Anja, if I stopped watching everything that had a trans joke in it, I would not be able to watch TV or movies anymore. And I was like, okay, So
it's good to check in. It's good to check in.
Yeah.
But then you also, that's difficult.
So we acknowledge it and then just be like, okay, let's hope that it gets a little bit better, Like we just watched, we've been watching Ash vs. Evil Dead, the TV series. Mm-hmm. In season 2 at one point, there is a black sex worker who we are supposed to know that they are trans or that they are a man, dressing up like that. And I saw it, and we both kind of like braced ourselves. And then, the character does some stuff, and eventually the character dies because it's a show, spoiler. But it's a show that has lots of death in it because that's Sam Raimi.
I thought you were going to say, and of course, she dies because she's a black sex worker. Because I would say, well, yes, in entertainment, that is sort of a death sentence very frequently.
But in this interesting one, it was like, no, it's just because it's a show where unless you're the main character, you die in some grisly way. And after the character died, we like looked at each other, and she was like, well, she died, but everybody dies in the show. And also, like, they didn't make any jokes about the voice or the body or anything like that. They made a joke about an STD, which then another character made a joke about also having an STD, and so it was equality, So it's stuff like that. But to tie back to what I was saying before, like, I think that is a beauty about some fandoms is that you were saying about how, like, that person is not in your life. They're not a real three-dimensional character, so you can latch on to that. And I think that that's what's nice about, like, you can take a video game character, because you know that video game character isn't going to have, like, a sex scandal, or they're not going to go on, like, a racist rant, or they're not going
But their creators can, and sometimes that's very frustrating.
Their creators can, yes, but that character itself doesn't. And that's one of the things that I think is really beautiful and powerful about WEBurlesque is getting to take a character and giving it more depth and nuance on a stage.
Well, we're going to take a break. We're going to take a minute, and then we're going to get into...
Jazz music's coming.
I know, yeah, jazz music's coming. And we're going to get into sort of your WEBurlesque mission statement, because you said a very important phrase earlier, which is... And that's why I think WEBurlesque is important. So we're going to find out why WEBurlesque is important with Anja Keister.
Did you know that I actually studied jazz vocals?
I did not. Did you actually study jazz?
I did actually study jazz vocal.
When did you
In undergrad, I went to school and I tried to double major in graphic design and music, but in order to do music you had to have a thing that you made music with,
sure.
And I wasn't good enough at any of the instruments I played to get in there, so I went in on singing, and then I realized, oh, this is a school where people are like training to be opera singers, and I'm definitely not going to do that, so I'm like, I'll just do jazz vocal, because it's a little bit easier, and it's not, because then I had to take classes on how to scat sing. And
did you have a interest in jazz when you were younger?
I mean, I did. When I was like 16, I dated 16 or 17. When I was 17, I dated a guy in high school who got me into jazz. I was already in like jazz band. This is Anja Keister's background in music. I was in concert band, marching band, orchestra, jazz band, choir, women's choir, show choir. And that was just at my school. That's every single thing in my school had to do with music I was in.
What instruments did you play?
I studied viola for a very short amount of time. And then I started playing alto sax, and then I moved to tenor sax because we didn't have any tenor saxophones, which is similar that I was a soprano, and then I became an alto because there was too many sopranos, and then I became a tenor because there wasn't enough tenors, and I could go low with my voice. And then I played guitar in jazz band.
Is there a reason that you haven't introduced music more into your burlesque persona?
Because I studied music in college and it scarred me, and I hate singing in public.
Okay. Fair enough.
I'm trying to get better at it. I was in the burlesque choir with Shelley Watson for a while, and so the thing was, which is especially going to show up now because I'm a little sick right now, but I have really bad sinuses.
Yeah,
I have
same.
a constant postnasal drip. And what happened was when I was studying music in college, I was just getting colds all the time. I was getting like constant sinus infections and everything like that. And I would show up to my lessons and I just wouldn't be able to sing, so we would do like other stuff. And then like about a year into having switched to jazz vocal, I once again showed up and I was like, I can't really sing, like I'll do warm-ups so we can go over stuff. And he just kind of sat me down. I was just like, I hate to be the person to tell you this, but I just don't think you're ever going to be a singer. He's like, I just don't think this is for you. You know, like, we'll continue out the semester so you can get credit for it, but, like, I just don't think this is for you. And, like, you know, I had the moment, we cried, we hugged.
Sure. And
then I was just like, that's true. This is...
like, actually, I know, yeah, I think you're right.
I think it's true. I think because of the way my body is, I'm just not meant to be a singer, and I don't care enough to do the things I'd already cut out dairy. I was on like a bunch of allergy medications. I was doing all the stuff to work, and it's just like, you know, I don't think my body's meant for me to be a singer. I'll do it fun and casually and karaoke, you know, but this is it. So with burlesque, like, singing was never something I still to this day have a lot of fear about, like, standing in front of other people and singing. Because I had it so ingrained in me, you know, like one of those teachers where I'm singing and anytime I would go flat or sharp, he'd like hit the piano.
Oh.
So it's like, ugh.
Yeah. This. Do you feel that hosting a show in front of an audience is a similar thing as singing in front of an audience?
Not for me. I've always been the sort of person who likes to get up in front of a crowd.
Did you put on shows as a child?
I put on shows as a child. It started with doing ballet performances when I was like 4, 5, 6. I never took ballet lessons, but I got a tutu. It was black, glorious. And I would perform little ballet things.
Would you perform to actually classical music?
Probably. I'd do it for when family friends would come over, and then around that same age, I started. When my family would do a vacation with like all my aunts and uncles, we would all go to the same resort. Resort is a very bougie word. It was not it was gross. It was a resort, but it was like lake water came out of the shower, so it wasn't a fancy resort. But my cousin and I would start doing productions there that I would like write and direct, and we would do things. Because I saw 42nd Street at the school, like at my high school, and I was like, we can sing songs from 42nd Street, and we did this. We did it on top of a septic tank that had like a big concrete slab on top of it, so it was called the sewer stage. And I would do sewer stage productions every summer. And then I eventually got...
You created your own summer stock, basically.
Sewer stock, yes. I created sewer stock with my cousin, where we would do these productions and perform them at the end of the week for the family at the big fish fry. And then I started going to Girl Scout camp and eventually became like a counselor there, where I'm standing up in front of huge groups of kids leading songs and performing stuff. So talking in front of large crowds was never an issue for me. The singing is a little bit more sensitive because it's something that I don't feel as comfortable with, so the insecurities creep in really quickly. But being in front of a crowd and doing ridiculous stuff has been something I've been doing since I was like 4.
You're one of the very few, that I know of, you're one of the very few performers and hosts in your own production that will do hosting and then do an act in your show as well. That is not necessarily a novelty, especially for performers who become producers, especially nowadays. But it is something that I think, since I view you as a performer, obviously, and I view you as a contemporary performer, but I think because there's a certain view of New York producers that we put the word producer in front of them first, that I think for you first as a producer. Yeah. So how do you put it all together that you're doing a show that you've curated, that you know who's going to be in it, and you know what they're going to do, more or less, and you have someone on sound, you have someone at the door, and you're going to host it, and you're going to introduce all these fabulous people that you are mostly, if not completely, responsible for having there. And then for about 5 minutes, you're going to do the same thing. Yeah. And you're going to go out and dance around. Now, I do this almost every week. Yeah. Almost every week. Yeah. And I've been told that I'm insane for it. And that's fine. I feel very incomplete when I don't do that, though. So I'm very curious, as someone who has a similar strand of insanity, how you manage that.
In the beginning, I was totally biting off more than I could chew. For the first D20 Burlesque show, I didn't host. I didn't host for the first year, but for the first show, I produced it. I performed 2 acts, and I DJ'd.
Who hosted?
In the beginning, we used to have Neela Fortune. We had Neela Fortune. We had Bastard Keith. Like, at one point, I had Broadway Brassy. Like, I had a smattering of different burlesque hosts. But once it got to the point where I was like, okay, I feel I'm only going to do 1 act as opposed to 2 acts every show. Or just like, I feel like I can do this. And also, it was cheaper to host it myself.
It is. You're free. You're free.
Coffee talk here. It's much cheaper to host your show yourself. I would say it's better to do it as long as you're good at it.
Yes.
I think that's an important part.
I think it is a necessary component, because the audience knows when you're not good. I know that sounds really obvious to say, but it can't just be about saving some money. Yes. It also has to be about people being in the seats enjoying themselves.
Yeah. So the way I would say I kind of do it is that, and I've actually pulled back on how much I perform in my shows anymore. One, just because it is hard. Like, for example, for the January show, it was my birthday show, so I wanted to do my act, which was my Handmaid's Tale act, which is really sad, really, 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 like, traumatic. And I really wanted to do it because it was my birthday show and I love to do that act. But unfortunately, to host and perform, I had to open the show with it, which was a rough choice. I mean, it's an act where I get on stage and I cry a bunch, and I, mime horrific things happening to me on stage. And it's like, welcome to the show. Here's a really sad act. But, so I introed the go-go, but before I did that, I even gave, like, the content warning of the night, saying, like, you're gonna see some funny acts, you're gonna see some sexy acts, you're gonna see some weird things, you're gonna see some acts that are gonna make you go...
And the theme of that show was apocalyptic, right?
Post-apocalyptic and dystopias.
Yeah.
So, like, all soul-crushing things.
The fandom...
Yeah.
There's implications.
The show was called Doom and Gloom. I was just like, I hope y'all realized there's going to be some sad stuff going on.
There's going to be some stuff.
But I had to do that because then I had to go run and get changed, and then Stormageddon introed my act. Okay. And I was just like, I'm going to give them a content warning beforehand if you can just mention that, like, remind them. You know, but still, it was like a rough start, but that's what I had to do because there wasn't time for me to get into that costume at any other point, and I wasn't going to host in that because...
Then you're making light of it.
I'm making light of it, and it's also, like, the surprise of me, like, slowly walking down the aisle, and it is part of it. You know, so those are the things that are hard when you're hosting and performing and producing, is that, like, sometimes you have to curate the show in a way that's not necessarily as strong as it could be. But,
right.
Like, that's what you gotta do to get the show done at the end of the day, and, you know.
Yeah. I see that. So when you created a show.
Yes.
That is nerdlesque or is fandom related or is theatrical stripping, however anybody wants to put that all together. When did you decide you wanted to do a show about that?
Oh, when did I decide I wanted to do, like, a nerdy show? It was, to tie back to the earlier conversation, I was new to burlesque. I was interested in it. I went to see Epic Win, and at the point they were a closed troupe. So I couldn't join them, and I was just like, well, I haven't seen anybody do a Cthulhu act. There was somebody, I didn't see it.
There's always somebody.
Viva La Muerta. She's has since retired the act, but hers was great. You know, and I'm like, I haven't seen anybody do an act where they're a big D20 with legs and they strip out of that. I'm like, I haven't seen that one. And I've only ever seen you in pictures in that. I actually destroyed the costume, so I need to recreate it. Okay. It was kind of a Phoenix situation where I was like, I will burn it to the ground, and if it rises again, then it will be more triumphant. Then it was meant to be. Yes, it'll be more triumphant. But it was like, I just had these act ideas, and I was like, I really, really want to do them. I'm just going to create my own show. At the time, I had been stage managing for WEBurlesque for about a year. And I had been, like, an event coordinator and an event planner in real life. And I was like, you know, I think I can do this. I think I can put together a show. So I went to Epic Win and got their blessing, and I talked with Doc WEBurlesque and went over, like, you know, tips and tricks and stuff like that, and I did it. And, you know, I would say, unless you're a person who has that kind of experience, I wouldn't suggest producing your own show in the first year of performing. No, I wouldn't say that either. I mean, I say that as someone who started producing the first show that they did, but I don't recommend it. Yeah. But that's also not to say that people can't do it well. Right. You know, it's kind of like when... it's hard to say when people are like, oh, newer performers should be paid less, or newer performers shouldn't get the same perks as somebody else. Heck, if you have... Did you like how I made this PG-13? You can have a person who's been trained ballerina performing with groups for, like, 10 years, and they're going to walk on stage, and they're going to be a better burlesque dancer than I am. A perfect example, Brady Valentino, who has been performing for fewer than 3 years, and is putting us all to shame. Yeah. I think that experience and being aware of your limitations is very important. Mm-hmm. And I think you are stronger if you accept your limitations and work with them. Yeah. And a lot of times that includes the management aspect, because it's not just putting on a show. The hour or hour and a half or even 2 hours that a burlesque show is happening is the least of it. Because then it's going to happen with or without you. That show will happen just because the acts have to. Mm-hmm. People might be late, people might not be there, people may fall apart, ankles may break, but that show is somehow going to happen. You can't
control that. But you still have to be the one who has all the emails, who knows where all the phone numbers are, who texted that person, who makes sure that the DJ is there, that all the sound works, that no one's using the same song in the same show. Like, these seems like really obvious things, but you need to actually want to do that too.
Yeah. There's so much behind the scenes to producing that I don't think people know. I mean, you guys, White Elephant does convention stuff, and
we're lower on that nowadays, but we have done it. We just had a show in Connecticut where it was a 2-day, it's sort of a convention. It's called the Brass Ring Academy and Cabaret, which was a lot of sort of steampunkish TED Talk type of stuff, as well as performances and vending and things like that, but in a carousel museum. Yeah, fabulous space.
Cool.
Absolutely fabulous space. So not like, like the local Hilton or something like that, which of course is also very difficult as a producer because you're looking at like, let's create a story and a mood, and everyone's sitting in a hotel chair and the whitest of walls, and yeah,
I remember
you hope for a good chandelier at least.
Yeah, one of the convention shows I did was just in like it was a convention whiteboard, so I brought like a bunch of sheets and I tried to tape up as much as I could, and we brought like clip lights so we could create ambiance, but still it was like we were performing in a room.
You have to sort of let go in that regard. And I think because I started in that, I'm only that much more particular now because I know what was, but that also means I'm amenable and adjustable. Fortunately, when we did the Carousel Museum show, it was gorgeous. There wasn't a bad place. Our dressing area was gorgeous because it was all artwork and statuary. Like, it was like, this could be our stage if we really wanted. And New York bars also are sometimes not always the most dramatic looking.
But the reason I bring up conventions in regards to production is that before our biggest show of the year, which is Gen Con, I will typically create like a Facebook status that's like, to keep myself accountable, here's all the things I need to do, and here's the things I've already done, and then I will update it as it goes on. And I always get all these people who are like, I had no idea there was so much stuff you have to do. It's like, yeah, no. Show production is really hard. Like, if you're doing it by yourself or mostly by yourself, it's really hard. It's not just a thing. And people always ask me, like, when I'm, like, before a show or something, that they'll be like, oh, are you really excited about the show? I go, I will be excited after intermission. Because, like you said, once the train has left the track, it's just about, like, keeping it on the track. But it's, like, show production is building the train first. So you're like, after intermission, it's mostly over. I got like 3 acts to get through in a raffle pull, and like, hopefully nothing will go wrong there. But it's like, there's so much that's so stressful when you're producing and hosting and performing.
What's, now obviously since you produce and you perform and you host a lot of times all at one, what's it feel like when you are a performer at someone else's show?
It's like the most luxurious vacation ever. It's like, I'll do a couple of promos the week of. I will double check my call time. I will pack my gig bag. I'll show up. I'll perform. I'll enjoy a show that I actually get to sit down and watch the rest of it, which is a thing I don't normally get to do. And then I go home. And I don't have to, like, touch money other than my payment. I don't have to worry about... I mean, you want a lot of people to show up. Like, you want people to see you, but, like...
But it's not per se your responsibility.
It's not as personable.
Yeah. And you don't feel as personally attacked when there's not an audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's delightful. All I want... I always talk about so much about wanting to go on tour, and people are like, yeah, you should do it. And I was like, I don't want to plan it. I just want somebody to say, hey, Anja, come do, like, these 4 gigs with me. Don't worry, I'm going to book the car, I'm going to book the hotel rooms, I'm going to talk to the venues,
you need someone on itinerary.
I'm going to do the promo for it, I'm going to get the street team to put up the thing. Like, I just want to show up at a place and be like, here I am.
Here I am.
Anja Keister, take me in, and then I get to go home at the end of the day. That's what I want. Will I get it? No, because I'm going to have to do it myself.
I get it. Now, when it comes to what the show actually ends up being, tell me, What does nerdlesque mean to you?
Okay, so we kind of got into this a little bit earlier. My own self-definition of nerdlesque has expanded so much over the years. I used to be a gatekeeper of it. I used to be like a nerd checker. I used to do all of the things that I hate people doing to me. And that's because I just grew. I remember, I want to say it was maybe 3 years in, so maybe like 2014 or 2013 or something like that. A performer made like a post, I don't know, I think maybe it was like an article in like Burlesque Beat or, I don't know, one of those burlesque websites, something, talking about how like nerdlesque is just cosplay with stripping and how it's bringing down the burlesque community and it's horrible, right? Like, whatever. That thing came out. I was very honored that night I got like text messages from a bunch of people that were like, "Have you seen this thing?" So I felt very seen in a very good way. I felt very relevant. Like whatever. I think I was probably just
everyone's calling you for your comment.
Yeah, exactly. And at the time I think it was like, I think I was gonna write like a very strongly worded thing about it. I believe Danger Doll ended up doing it instead, so I didn't have to write a big thing about it. But like I was really defensive. I was like, it's not cosplay. So I was like, now like in retrospect, I'd be like, okay, sure. So if it's cosplay stripping, like, are people enjoying it? Is it doing anything bad? No. I kind of feel it's similar to the like, just let people enjoy things. Like, okay, cool. It's not your cup of tea. Okay, so I have like 80 people in this bar who are loving it. Cool, awesome. Like, those 80 people, they're having a great time. Their life, their month, week, life, whatever, is changed and altered in some way, and I helped make that happen. I'm completely fine with that. And then because then it also got into the whole thing, like, with Francine, where when she was doing Pink Room Burlesque early on, people would be like, this nerdlesque show, the Pink Room, and probably for like the first couple of months it's like, well, that's not nerdlesque, that's like pop culture burlesque because it's not nerdy because it's a TV show. And now I'm just like, whatever, like, I'm doing shows about podcasts, I'm doing shows about TV shows. Nerdy can mean so many things. It's hard because of being on the production team for the Nerdlesque Festival. One of the criteria, like when we're critiquing the submissions, is like, is this a pop culture? Is this like, will nerds enjoy this? And that's kind of hard to say because like people can nerd out about so much stuff.
So much.
Like, is this Shakespeare act nerdlesque? Yes, it's not my nerd. It's not my nerdery, but it's still nerdlesque.
It's still there, yeah.
And we get into this really gray area. So I just kind of, the way I think about nerdlesque is to nerd out about something.
And also I think some acts can be based on a fandom and not necessarily be a nerdlesque act.
Yes. I mean, you can also have a person who's saying, this is my act about, this is my tribute to the Millennium Falcon.
Right.
And they come out and it's just a classic act where they're wearing silver.
Sure.
And it's kind of like, is this nerdlesque?
It's inspired.
I don't know.
Yeah.
If it is to you, cool. Like,
I mean, we mentioned this person's name off microphone earlier. Heart Crimson is a performer who I think has recently relocated to New York.
Moved back to New York.
And I met them at the Nerdlesque Festival, and they did a piece to music from The Shining. And there are elements that are directly influenced by The Shining. But it's really, in my estimation, it's a socio-political piece.
Yes.
It is a statement piece, and it's using a medium on top of a medium, which is nerdlesque on top of The Shining, to present this, I wouldn't say it's a perspective, but to make the statement.
Yes.
And that is fascinating because it shows, I mean, that's something I think that article writer from years ago didn't anticipate. Yeah. For one thing.
I mean, there was a lot of hatred against nerdlesque in the beginning. There was a lot of people in the burlesque world that
I could see it being viewed as either not lazy, but you're not self-representing.
Yeah.
Or that you're...
Yeah, a lot of people were like, why would you want to do something off of a character that already exists when you could create your own character?
Right. Like, because those characters are important.
They're exciting. And
they're recognizable, and your audience will know who they are. And you can write fan fiction with your body.
There's a reason that people like fan
Clearly, I'm on the side of Nerdlesque.
There's a reason people like things that are fan service, and it's because it's easy to digest, and it's a thing that they love, so you already have those good feels when the character walks on stage.
It's shorthand to a certain degree, yeah. And you only got so many minutes as a burlesquer.
Yeah, and I think, so this is one of my favorite stories to tell about Nerdlesque.
Sure.
This was probably this is maybe 2014, 2015. We were performing at Gen Con, and this performer, Foxy Vermouth, did this act from Metal Gear Solid. Now, this is a video game franchise I have never played. I was not super familiar with it, but and I'm not even going to be able to remember the character name, but it's this woman, and there's wolves involved, and she's a sniper, and I think her code name has something to do with wolves, and in the video game franchise, spoiler alert for this video game that came out in the early aughts, she dies, and in the video game when she dies, all these wolves, they're in Russia or something, all these wolves come out and they all start howling.
And you're like, she's in Russia. That's why the wolves come out. There's a little hand wave gesture that I really appreciated there. It's in Russia.
It's in Russia. So these wolves will start howling, and that's how the character dies, and it's the cinematic scene in this rough early video game. So this performer did an act as, it might be Sniper Wolf is the name of the character, did an act as the character. So she comes out, and she's in the snipery looking gear and a jacket, and has a big rifle and stuff like that. And then in the middle of the act gets shot, like the character does, right? And what she decided to do was she said, I don't think the character ends there. I want to elongate this character's life on stage. And so what she does is she takes it all out, and she gets shot, and she has this bullet hole with fringe that looks like blood. And then what she did, she transformed into a wolf on stage. So she puts on a tail, and she ends the act with a wolf mask on, right? So it's the character dies, but then she becomes a wolf. So she's elongating this character who we see die in a very sad, tragic way, which I thought was a beautiful way. Like you said, it's a character, it's established. I'm taking the character and writing fan fiction on stage with it to make this character's life beautiful and worth living. But what happened at the performance at Gen Con was, she did it, the character gets shot on stage, she starts to transform, and the audience started howling like the wolves in the video game. And she finished the act and stood up on stage, and the whole audience was just howling like wolves. Not in a woo woo, but
no, mournful.
I
actually totally just got chills.
Yes, exactly. It was beautiful. I cried, I got goosebumps. It was just the most beautiful reaction I've ever seen. And it was her paying tribute to a character who died in a video game and giving this character a more peaceful, beautiful ending. And the audience was yes, we're here for this. We are showing our appreciation by howling as you become a wolf. And to me, that's there you go. Print that in your thesis. That is why Nerdlesque is important. Because it was this absolute beautiful moment. And it's also fun to see whatever, D20's doing our /fiction show again. That's fun. That's getting to see characters do lustful things on stage. We do things about podcasts where it's not a visual medium, and we get to create a visual for people who love this thing that's just oral. There's so many important things that Nerdlesque has to do, and it's I'm glad you are a cute cat, or you're a maid, and you're being cheeky and coquettish on stage, and people get to enjoy that. I get to enjoy seeing somebody become a board game on stage and be clever about it.
Absolutely.
I think both of these are completely legit.
And there are some acts that to this day, I know intellectually that they're Nerdlesque acts, but I don't know who they're talking about. And for example, the Foxy act that you referred to, if I had seen it, yes, intellectually I know it's based on something, but I'm sure I would appreciate it on a creative entertainment level as well. Yeah. Several of the acts that, you have an act where you're kind of a storm cloud.
The glow cloud.
The glow cloud.
Yes.
I have absolutely no idea what that is from, but I'm very entertained by it. And I saw that at, I want to say a show I wasn't in. I don't remember which show you did that for.
It might have been the podcast show.
No, I wasn't at the podcast show.
I don't know. That one doesn't get a whole lot of play, but it's a pity because it is one that I tried to make a more general act. That
It reads as a absurdist act.
Yeah.
In a similar way, in a similar vein, as someone like Tiger Bay's Cheeseburger Act.
Yeah.
It's not a nerdlesque act Cheeseburger Act I don't think is a nerdlesque act in nature, but it doesn't necessarily need the host to say, okay, so folks, in the 90s there was this show and then it was made into a movie and the movie didn't do very well and now they're rebooting it on Netflix and this is why you should care about it. Like there's no need for all of that.
Yeah, no, I get you. Yeah, no, the Glow Cloud one I created. It's an act where like I'm wearing a neck corset and a face covering.
Night Veil? Is that what that's from?
Welcome to Night Veil. Yeah. So it's like a spooky act. It's like
a
spooky act. Like you only see my eyes and parts of my body, and then I end it with lines from the podcast. But I can also just easily edit those out. It can just be a weird, spooky, kooky act. I
think it's it stands on its own. But then again, when you have other acts of yours, you a lot of times, I find, expand upon a character. You don't just do a scene from whatever movie or show that they're from. And one of them that I think most people will associate with you is they're knee-high boots? Are they knee-high boots?
They are like
mid-thigh.
They should be thigh-high, but I'm a tall lady, so they're like mid-thigh boots.
That would be Dolores Umbridge.
Yes.
Who is from the Harry Potter series. Yes. Imelda Staunton. I would love to know her take on all of this. But you go in a very specific direction with that. Where do you decide that a character that is universally despised gets such a loving tribute where they become a pro-dom that you actually might want to punish you?
I think with that one, so I created that act way early.
Is that old?
It's super old. I did that act for get a load of this cast. Look at this all-star cast. This was probably like 2010 or 2011. Myself, Hazel Honeysuckle, and Danger Doll.
Oh.
Yes, right? And we each had to do 2 acts.
Okay.
So I did... That's where, if you've ever seen Danger's Act, where her owl one, where she has like her face... It came from that one, where she's Hedwig the Owl.
Okay.
And originally
I saw a very early version of that. I wonder which...
Did it still have hanging pieces of paper?
I don't remember.
It's an act that she was able to transform into just like a regular act, but in the beginning she was an owl. She was Hedwig. And what it was is like
she does it to Pucifer, right? The mission?
I think so.
I think so,
And
yeah.
in the beginning she opened her arms and off of it were like strings that had little rolled parchment on it, so she was delivering the notes. But I did which is now misguided and I would not do, but I did a Snape act where I drank a potion and I became a sexy lady, right? That old chestnut of burlesque, where it's like, I drink a potion and now I have to take off my clothes.
Yeah.
But I loved it because I did it to Paula Abdul's Cold Hearted Snake. And to this day, I still want to do a Snape act where I do it to that song.
I think that's still something that the world can benefit from.
So I did that one, and then I decided to do Dolores Umbridge because, I didn't feel at the time like I wanted to be any of the kids' characters, and to this day I'm a little uncomfortable about portraying teenagers or younger kids in
a sexual
state. Yeah, it's a thing I go very back and forth on, and more recently I've been more uncomfortable with it. But to each their own. I was like, okay, I want to do a villain. And like the other performers had chosen specific characters. I was like, I'm going to do Umbridge. What could I do? So I sat and I was watching the movie to try to get inspiration from it. And there's the line, don't you know deep down you deserve to be punished, Mr. Potter. And this was like, haha, there's the burlesque in for me. So I decided, I was going to be Dom. And it was like, literally like day of my partner going to, like, a sex shop nearby and buying me the boots and buying me... I think she bought me, like, 3 different whips because we didn't know which one I was going to use. And it was, like, the first time I ever performed it, she brought me the boots backstage. And she's like, I hope these were the ones you want. And I was like, yes. I get on stage, I set it up, and I'm trying to get my foot into the boot. And it was a new shoe, and the paper was in there, so I couldn't even get my foot in the shoe. So I, like, tried as best as I could and zipped it, and I, like, hobbled around the stage. So embarrassing. But that was, now, like, 6 or 7 years later. Wow. It's an act I perform.
A lot.
I've performed it in Alaska. I've performed it in multiple festivals. I've toured with it. I think it's one where it was a great way of taking a character and saying, what's beneath the surface of this character that we don't know? What's the fan fiction of sorts? And every time I perform it, somebody afterwards will come up to me and be like, I had never thought about it, but you're 100% right. She's totally a dom. And I'm like, yeah, she is. Get to make her. I mean, I think she's one of the worst villains of the movie.
Yeah.
If not, maybe the.
She's the most human.
She's the most human, and there's a lot to be said about the way that the Harry Potter series treats women, treats their female villains. I will say that it's not necessarily very kind.
No.
Way that they treat their female... Because between Rita Skeeter, Dolores Umbridge... Bellatrix, it's all like they're either unhinged, or they're uppity, or it's like...
Malfoy has a little bit more.
She has a little bit more. Yeah, she has some nuance to it. But I don't even necessarily consider her a villain, because I think she has so much redemption.
Well, I think we're meant to, and I think...
In the beginning, yeah.
Because she has character development, then she doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
But that's, again, part of maybe the issue.
But I mean, it's, I like giving her some depth, that it's like, okay, so maybe she's evil, but maybe that's part of her shtick, and that's what she gets off on, so.
Cool. We're going to take a little break, and then we're going to have a little lightning round with, I want to find out some of the fandoms you love and do not love.
Okay.
So we'll talk in just a minute.
Skip-a-doo-ba-doo-da, just break!
We're back with WEBurlesque and Anja Keister, and we are going to go through a few of the most popular fandoms and some of the least popular fandoms, according to some internet person.
Okay.
I'm going to probably generalize a few of them because some of these get awfully specific and I just can't be bothered.
That's fine.
But I want a general summation.
Okay.
To show that there are variances to nerd culture and people who find themselves as nerdy folk. And I'm just curious about some of your favorite things and some of your least favorite things, or how you feel about them.
So everybody, welcome to the WEBurlesque lightning round.
All right, we're going to start with, we actually mentioned this earlier, but to expand upon it just a little bit, Harry Potter.
I love Harry Potter. I was resistant for a really long time. I wanted to wait, like a promise ring for myself. I wanted to wait until all of the movies were out until I read any of the books. And then my partner's mom was like, that's really stupid, and I think you should not do that. And she gave me the books, and then I read them, and now I love it.
How do you feel about the movie adaptations?
I like the core movies. I liked Fantastic Beasts. I enjoyed it. I know there's problematic issues to it, but it's okay to like something that's problematic as long as we acknowledge that Johnny Depp is a horrible guy.
That actually is the summation, really.
Yeah.
Supernatural.
I tried real hard to like it, but I know that it's one of those shows you have to get past the first season and then it starts to get meta, and it was really hard because I'm a completionist, so I couldn't do it. I watched like 3 episodes and I was too tired of seeing women die all the time.
Lute Alfred actually mentions that in the last episode. Doctor Who.
I know very little about Doctor Who.
You've probably learned more about it from your shows.
Yes, I've learned a lot about Doctor Who from having to learn what acts people are doing.
Same.
It's a completionist thing where if I'm going to do it, I'm going to watch all of it, and people keep telling me different things about where I should start, and so I've just never conquered it.
This is a very wide net, because it's the internet. I'm going to just say anime.
I love anime. I unfortunately don't do it as much as I used to. I was very much, before weeaboo was a word, I was an otaku. I started anime club in my high school, and then I started anime club in my college. But unfortunately, because of the life that I live and being an entrepreneur, I feel like I always have to be working 100% of the time, so I can't watch things that are subtitled. Because I'm always on because I'm always on my computer.
Multitasking is really hard with that.
Yes. So unfortunately, I don't watch as much anime as I should, and I'm trying to get back into it, but it's very hard for me because now there's just so much of it. And the anime I started with was all very dark and cynical and broody. And it's hard for me because I'll watch one and I always wait for like, when do they start killing everybody? When does the magic come in? When do the monsters show up? And it's like, nope, this is just
not that one. It's not that episode.
Cute magical girl show.
Game of Thrones.
I have read them all. I've read I've read a lot of fan theory. I've watched the show. I thoroughly enjoy Game of Thrones despite it being problematic, but I love it. I mean, I was pretty much reading the books synonymously with watching the show. So I enjoy it. I think the books were fun because you got to have a lot more theories. And then it's sad when you watch the TV show and it's like, oh, they didn't include that character. Guess my theory isn't true.
Surprise! Yeah. Star Wars.
I love Star Wars so much. I have Star Wars tattoos. I have a lot of Star Wars stuff. I will always love Star Wars. I don't think there's a way you can tell me. It'd be really hard for them to do something that would make me not love Star Wars. That being said, I'm not like a very obsessive Star Wars fan. Okay. Like, I would struggle to tell you names of
secondary characters.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
But I like it because I really like fantasy, and it's space fantasy. I see it as a fantasy space opera, and I love it, and I love the way the new series is going. So I loved The Last Jedi.
I did too. I was very pleased with it. Star Trek.
I know very little about Star Trek.
You have a Star Trek act.
I have a Star Trek act. My Star Trek act is a Spock act that I created because I was doing the Burlesque Legends show, and I was paying tribute to Pillow, who is a big Trekkie, and she has a bunch of Trek acts, so I figured rather than... Because there's not footage of her acts, or there's not a lot of footage of her acts that I could try to mimic. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I'm just going to do Trek. She's more of a Next Generation person. I did original series. So I created it, but I watched Star Trek to create that act, and I watched some documentaries about it. Once again, I'm a completionist, and there's a lot of material there. But the amazing performer, Zelma, is going to put together a list of the original series episodes that are the most important, and I can skip the rest of them, and then I can watch it. And
as long as you see The Voyage Home, I think you're fine.
Okay.
That's the whale movie.
Oh.
It's for a very
I'm trying to make whale noises.
For a very specific group of Trek fans, the whale movie is better than Wrath of Khan. Yeah, I said it. It's my show. My Little Pony.
Okay. I did several My Little Pony burlesque shows. I was into My Little Pony. Well, you're talking My Little Pony Friendship is Magic.
I'm talking about My Little Pony, the franchise.
Okay. I grew up on a household where we had horses, because I grew up on a farm. And so I had a lot of My Little Ponies growing up, and I used to watch the My Little Pony cartoons and all that stuff. My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, I was hesitant on. I watched it, I performed some burlesque acts to it and did some burlesque shows about it. But that was one where the fandom got too toxic for me that I had to step away from it. Because it was just a little too...
I think a lot of times the worst things of things are the fans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
I'm going to ask a controversial question. DC or Marvel?
Marvel.
Why?
Because I like my characters flawed.
Do you not think that DC characters are flawed?
I think some of them are, but I think a lot of them are not. I will always 100% be a Marvel person. I feel like... I mean, early comics are comics. They're comics. They are what they are. But I feel like Marvel had so much to say with the X-Men on social commentary that it's more... To me, I feel like I get more out of Marvel and the flawed characters that they have, and that they let them be really, really flawed. I mean, yeah, Bruce Wayne has some PTSD, and other people have PTSD, but I will always be Marvel.
All right. I'm going to close out on the popular side of things before we get into controversial, maybe not so popular things. And it's one of the most popular sci-fi things happening right now, which I would say is Stranger Things. How are you on Stranger Things?
I love Stranger Things. I thought it was, as a person who grew up or who was young in the 80s, I 100% connected with the 80s field, all the Spielberg stylistic stuff, being able to see like the same cookware I grew up with in the
the attention to detail.
They do 80s very well. It's not neon, big puffy hair and
yes,
like, stuff.
It's not too self-aware. I appreciate that. Yeah. It reads authentic.
The show The Americans also does 80s very well, if you've ever watched The Americans.
Is that the one where they're in a sleeper cell?
It's the one where they're Russian spies.
Aha.
You know Russia.
They're in Russia. With the wolves.
But yes, but no, they do 80s very well. And Stranger Things is cute and it's good, and I like that there's like, the second season had a little bit of sexualization of the kids, but I think it's good. I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
I'm never going to do a burlesque show of it, though.
You're never.
Too much sexualization of children. But. Yeah,
that's fair. All right. Oh, actually, I'll do one more thing that is more or less relatively constantly known as beloved. Pokemon.
Pokemon was a thing that I don't know much about because it was an anime that was too young for me when I was into anime.
Okay.
Like I said, I started with Akira.
Okay.
And, like, accidentally buying hentai offline. So when people were like, Sailor Moon and Pokemon and Digimon and Dragon Ball Z, I was like, get this childlike stuff out of here. I need to watch hardcore, scary anime. It's always the divider between my partner and I, because she's 3 or 4 years younger than me, so she, like, did all of the childlike anime, and I did all of the scary adult anime.
So this is on Ranker.com, so it's a bunch of it's like one of those like vote up, vote down situations if you're not familiar with Ranker.com. And these are items that they're trying to say are not popular, or that they're trying to say that people don't like as much as they want to say. Number one, of course, on that list is The Big Bang Theory.
I don't like The Big Bang Theory. I've never really watched too much of it, but I've seen so much about how the men on Big Bang Theory are so toxic towards women. And that we give them a free pass because they're nerdy, so they don't seem threatening like other men. But it's all the same kind of gross toxic masculinity and mistreatment of women. It's
also like super. See, the friend zone. It's just a matter of persistence. It's a lot of that.
Yeah, and it's also a thing where it's like my mom enjoys it, and she's like, "Look, I like this nerdy thing," and I have to be like, "Cool, Mom, happy for you."
I'm going to generalize this, and I'm curious some examples. You mentioned you liked board games.
Yes.
What are some of your favorite board games?
There's a lot of new board games out there that I don't play as much. I would say my favorite board games tie back to kind of like your original ones.
Your Parker Brothers?
Parker Brothers. I'm just going to look. I love Scrabble. I played a lot of Scrabble. There was one point in my life where I played three games of online Scrabble every day.
I thought you were going to say at the same time, like you were Bobby Fischer. And I say, well.
I mean, I will always have a love of Settlers of Catan because it's just good. I really do like Power Grid, which is another good one. Spiele des Jahres, which is the game of the year from the German gaming group. I'm pretty much like, as long as you sit down and you teach me a game, I will enjoy it. It's just learning new games can be hard.
Yeah, you have an knack to Risk, which is, of course, the longest game in the world.
Yes. One time, my friends and I combined Risk and Monopoly, and we called it Riskopoly. And it was, you played Monopoly until all of the properties on the board were bought, and then the properties on the board coincided with the countries on the Risk map. So you played Monopoly until all the properties were bought, and then you played a game of Risk built around that. It lasted, I think it lasted 12 hours.
I really think it was like, it lasted about a year and a half. Monty Python.
I enjoy Monty Python. I don't think I understood them as a kid. I watched a lot of Holy Grail, and I watched Life of Brian. And then when it started getting into Flying Circus and other things, I think the British humor was a little too much for me. And there's also a lot of weirdness with things that I was just like, I don't know if this is good, like kind of seeing things that were problematic and just like, I don't know if this is okay. I was more of a Kids in the Hall person.
Okay.
When it came to foreign, I'm giving some air quotes, foreign comedy troupes.
Magic the Gathering.
I have a huge box of Magic the Gathering cards on this table right here that is covered with other stuff. So, I played it. I understand it. I get it. It's just hard because it's a game where you have to play with other people who have decks, and so it becomes a little bit of a...
It's unwieldy.
It's a financial thing for people, and I don't like games where if you don't have money, you can't be good at a thing.
I'm amazed this is on the list of possibly controversial. The Muppets. How are you about the Muppets?
I feel pretty okay with the Muppets. I don't have a strong love for them or anything like that. Okay. I watched them as kids. I watched the show. I enjoy it. Yeah. I like
cool
Jim
with
Henson.
them?
I think I'm more into other Jim Henson.
What's your other Jim Henson?
Dark Crystal. Will I think be my favorite.
Are you excited or curious at least for the new Netflix reimagining
of the Dark Crystal?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll love it.
Like it done. I love it.
I
love it right now.
It's like kind of like Star Wars with me. Like, sure, I'll love this.
Do you like Labyrinth?
I do like Labyrinth. I don't think it aged as well as I would like to. Like, I think I rewatched it. I showed it to my partner who had never seen it. Probably like 4 years ago, and I was cringing a lot.
The pacing is really rough in places,
and it dates. It's pretty dated.
Yeah,
but I mean, I loved it. I had the soundtrack on like record. I think as a kid.
Are you a David Bowie fan?
I am, and I fully acknowledge that he had problematic parts to him. But I am a huge David Bowie fan. When he died, it hit me really, really hard. Yeah, no, he was a lot for me as a kid. I had a cassette tape because we had like a bunch of his records, and I made cassettes of his records, and I listened to him pretty constantly as a kid. So he meant a lot to me.
Zombies. How do you feel about zombies?
Zombies were a huge fear of mine for a really long time, and what I did was I made myself watch zombie movies to get over my fear. So I love zombies, even though I'm very scared of them. I am one of those people that I very much, if you were to say, what's your zombie apocalypse plans, I could tell you what my plans are, where I would drive, how I would do, the seeds I have stored in places so I could grow gardens. I'm one of those people.
Okay.
Like a zombie bunker person.
Were you a Walking Dead watcher?
I am a Walking Dead reader to a degree, and I was a watcher. I stopped halfway through the last season because the world felt scary enough as it was that I didn't need really bleak zombie.
Did you feel at that time you were moving more towards lighter, more happy things?
Yes. Yeah. Well, there's a whole... Well, so zombies were also a thing because I grew up downhill from a cemetery. So I could see a cemetery from my house growing up. So zombies were very scary.
My father lived in Tennessee for about 10 months when I was an adolescent, and he was in a parsonage, which was adjacent to the church, separated by a graveyard.
Yeah.
And as he's showing me, because this was after my parents divorced, so I'm visiting.
Yeah.
And as he's showing me, he says, "You're going to watch out for Emma. There's this family of people who are buried in the front row, and the gravesite for Emma has caved in. So you watched out for Emma. You just made sure you just walked right over her, and you kept on going.
Yeah.
That is I grew up in rural Connecticut up until my adolescence, so the idea of cemeteries or them being in residential areas isn't a foreign concept to me. But I don't remember ever being, like, super afraid of them. But I didn't watch a lot of horror movies and stuff as a child.
When I saw a horror movie where zombies came out of graveyards, that was kind of scary.
That would do it.
Yeah.
That would do it. Okay.
But I love zombies
now. Musical theater.
So this is one where I was concerned musicals were going to come up during this podcast, because you are way more into musicals than I am.
I am.
I was definitely a musical person. I was in drama club and wanted to do the musical.
And we're not going to get into, like, a Bernadette versus LaPone argument, I hope. Okay. But
I know who those people are.
Oh, see? There you are. So we can't.
But it's like, I have no, like, concept of current musicals. I was really into them. I got, for my 16th birthday, I got tickets to go see Cabaret and got to take a friend with me.
Who'd you see?
It was the week after Alan Cumming had left.
Okay.
But it was Michael C.
Michael C. Hall?
Michael C. Hall.
Okay.
So it was still really exciting.
Yeah.
But it was, like, very heartbreaking for me.
I've still never seen Alan. I saw John Stamos, who was exquisite.
That's exciting.
And I saw Adam Pascal, who was also very good, but did not live up to John Stamos.
Yeah, I understand. The other rough one for me was I saw Rent the week, and I don't remember his real name, but the guy who played Angel, or from My So-Called Life.
Wilson Cruz.
Wilson Cruz.
He's now in the new Star Trek.
Oh, is he?
He's Anthony Rapp's lover.
Right. Yes. I think I have a copy of that.
I think that's so funny that I don't even know if they were in the show at the same time, but two Rent folk are now.
But yeah, like, it was the week after Wilson Cruz had left Rent, and I was so crushed because all I wanted to do was to see Ricky on stage playing Angel. But it was like the footage at the end of the musical where they're showing him, it still had Wilson Cruz in the footage, and so I was like, I kind of got to see it.
A little bit.
But yeah. So I love musicals, but it's a thing I'm not very super up to date on it.
What is your thought on the cartoon family genre, which may include Bob's Burgers, The Simpsons, and Family Guy?
I feel like those are such different things that it's really unfair to compare. But I will say I'm not a huge fan of, because technically you could throw Steven Universe in there.
Yes.
And I love Steven Universe, but I don't know, I watch... They
don't spend a lot of time on, like, a couch, I guess, and that's their idea of...
I mean, I think they all have merit to them. I'm not a Family Guy fan. I'm not a huge Bob's Burgers fan. That's not to say I have anything against it. I don't know, whatever. It's a thing I wasn't super into. There's a lot of stuff, and that's a genre that I'm not as into.
All right. Moving on from this, just because I'm curious and I saw something that made me think of this, what are some of your favorite costumes you wore as a child? For Halloween, let's say.
I was in a family where we had to make our Halloween costumes growing up. I mean, I had a few of the plastic mask, plastic smock that I think I got as a hand-me-down from my sister. But it was mainly you made your own. So I didn't have any really, like, super specific ones, because it's mainly we'd go to the thrift store and I'd find some stuff and we'd see what I could make. I had a really
So you don't have, like, any, like, specific fandom-related...
No, I didn't really do, like, fandom. See, I think
how very interesting.
And I think that's a reason, too, why I wasn't, like, super into cosplay, because I was always just like, I'm a generic wizard. I did, like, a lot of Ren Fair, so I'd be like, I'm a princess, I'm a knight, I'm a wizard.
But I'm not those knights or wizard or princesses.
I wasn't usually a specific character, because you have to do what you can out of the thrift store.
Right. What were your favorite Saturday morning cartoons? Or after school, Disney afternoon, or what have you, cartoons?
I'm trying to think. There wasn't, like... If you were like, that show, I'd be like, yeah, I liked that. That show, I liked that. There's nothing that stands out. I actually got more into, on Saturday mornings, Cartoon Network would do anime movies, and so I watched a lot of those. So if anything, that was more of my Saturday morning cartoons, was watching, like, anime films that were dark and gritty, but edited for TV.
What were some of your favorite young adult books? or
like
novels?
all of them. I still love young adult books.
Are you excited for Wrinkle in Time?
Yeah, Wrinkle in Time was one. I think I read. My problem was I read a lot of young adult books when it was actually like
a young adult,
too young.
Yeah.
To understand a lot of them. So a lot of them could, I think, actually benefit from a reread. Because I read like Goosebumps when I was in 4th grade, and then I started reading Fear Street when I was in 5th grade, which was
the
way
other?
Too early.
There was the one that was slightly nastier than Fear Street. That was sort of, it wasn't dirty, but it was like meaner. Like they were harsher to their characters.
Oh,
I'm trying to remember what it was.
I also read like Christopher Pike.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking of.
Oh, Christopher Pike.
What was his series? Do you remember?
I don't remember the name of the series, but I read a lot of Christopher Pike. I mean, I basically any series that was fantasy or supernaturally or paranormal as a kid, I loved and read all of them. There was one series, Jane Yolen was the writer, and she did a 3-part dragon series that I absolutely loved. I really loved the Bruce Coville.
Oh my god, I loved Bruce Coville. My teacher's is an alien.
Aliens ate my homework.
And then where the aliens have their own like thing, and they're all Did you Jennifer Murdley's Toad? Did you read that?
No, I don't know that one.
That was a good one. But I remember being really mad at it, only because the cover, the whole book, the whole point is that she has self-esteem issues because of her looks, and that and they describe her. And on the cover, she's pretty and blonde. And I remember, like, I remember being, like, 11 or 12 and me being like, y'all can even get that right. How dare you?
The young adult books, I love all of them. Like, I recently went back and reread The Giver. I loved, what was the Westinghouse?
Yes.
These are my jams. Like, I love these books.
We had the same scholastic weekends, I swear.
Were you part of the Book It program where you would get the little Book It stickers on your badge and then you get a pizza?
No, I don't remember.
This is one of the reasons, it's not the reason, but this is one of the reasons I can say I became a chubby kid, was my school had the Book It program where through Pizza Hut you'd get a little pin, and it'd have like 8 things on it, and when you read 8 books, you'd get like a little gem sticker that you put on it, and then you would take it to the Pizza Hut and you get a personal pan pizza. I got a personal pan pizza every week because I would go to the library and I'd find 8 short books and I would read them all. So I was getting personal pan pizzas all the time. Book It program, love it.
See, I wasn't allowed to have Pizza Hut as a child.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Even if you read books?
Yeah, that I wasn't allowed to have sugary cereal either. Wow. The first thing I bought with my own money was Lucky Charms. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So that was a little window into your fandoms. What fandoms do you feel don't get enough shine, or that you think might benefit, that people might benefit from being exposed to? They can be popular, even if they're not.
I'll start with animated, because this is where my mind immediately went to, because these are 2 that I talk about a lot. There is a cartoon called Star vs. the Forces of Evil that is a Disney cartoon. It's really great. They have good diversity. They have lots of different body types. Unfortunately, it does get a little bit into the kids having, like, dating and stuff like that, but for a long time on the series, it's just like a boy and a girl and their friends. And I always appreciate a show that has that. So Star vs. Forces of Evil, very good. It's like a magical girl reimagining through fantasy, but it's silly. I connect a lot to the character of Marco, who is very uptight and doesn't want to get in trouble. So that one. Another one was, there was Scooby-Doo Incorporated, Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, which came out maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, which is a Scooby-Doo reboot that is so clever. Everybody's still wearing 70s clothes, but it's modern day, and they like kind of explain why people are wearing 70s clothes. They have a whole Twin Peaks tie-in where they go into the Red Room.
Sort of like pre-Riverdale.
Yeah.
Sort of. They
do like some, like, there's ska involved in it. That's like, it's...
Nothing, the kids love their ska.
Kids love ska. But they're also like, with all this stuff, like, there's pop culture things, but they're really good. They allow Velma to be gay.
Oh, cool.
Like, it's not like open. There's I think there's gay couples on the show. It's not openly, but she definitely starts the series dating a guy and ends it really liking girls and making allusions to it. So that
the true subversive would be, of course, that Velma would be more or less heterosexual, and it's Daphne that ends up being the lesbian. That would be the real subversion.
But it's really good, and it's a show that at one point they talk about toxic masculinity. Oh. Fred is scared to say he loves and have feelings because he's a boy, and he's like, I can be a boy and have feelings too. It's a very good show. Those are two that I'd say check out because they are good. Anja Keister, stamp of approval. Other than that, I'm trying to think. I don't know. Play some cool tabletop games that are different than the ones you normally do. Dread is one of my favorites. Dread is a role-playing game system where instead of rolling dice, you have a Jenga tower, and if the Jenga tower falls when you pull, your character dies.
Wow.
So it's the most suspenseful... It's like a horror suspense mystery kind of role-playing game system, but it's super scary. Because it's what it is so you're like, I'm gonna stab the vampire. And they say, to do that, you have to pull a piece from the tower, and the tower looks like it's going to fall. You're like, you know what? I don't go to stab the vampire. I walk away. It's very stressful.
A lot of natural ones in that system.
Yeah, it's really stressful because it's super suspenseful with the tower. So I think it's one of the best suspense role-playing games out there.
I'll check that out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, excellent. Well, this will probably... come out very shortly after we've recorded this, but is there anything that you want to say that's coming up that you're particularly excited about?
Check out D20 Burlesque. The show's every month. We're going to be doing a show on St. Patrick's Day, so I'd really love if people came out, because I normally do not leave my house on St. Patrick's Day.
What's the theme?
I haven't decided yet, but because I have to figure out something that's going to make people want to come to a burlesque show on St. Patrick's Day.
Right.
But I will also say, follow me on Instagram, thank you, at Anja Keister. That's the social media I do the most. I have a YouTube channel where I talk about nerdy stuff. You can find that. And also the Nerdlesque Festival, happening April 27th through the 29th at Coney Island, USA. Please come to that.
Excellent. Are you going traveling at all for anything upcoming? I know you have Gen Con coming up.
Gen Con.
That's in August?
Yes.
Where is it? Indianapolis?
Indianapolis. You can find us there. We'll be doing our show as always. We'll probably be back at DexCon. Which
always
is
fun.
July.
That's in Jersey.
Yeah, that's in Jersey, in Morristown. Find us there. And other than that, I'm not doing a lot of traveling this year because I'm kind of focusing on some other stuff that's taking financial burdens.
Well.
And getting married.
That's right. Well, and having and housing at least a few foster cats.
Yes, foster cats. Find my Instagram, Keister Foster Kittens, and look at cute pictures of kittens and then adopt them.
In that order.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate, Anja, that you have spent this time with me. This was a bit of a longer chat, but it felt very quick.
I know.
I enjoyed it very, very much.
Good. It's almost like when people get to nerd out.
It's very nice.
Track of time.
Well, that's another reason. I've never wanted this, in case anybody wondered, I don't come into an interview with a legal pad of notes or anything that I'm like, okay, we're going to talk about this.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about this. And I want to make sure that you hit this word and this word. It either happens or it doesn't. There was a bunch of stuff that I thought we might get to that, frankly, an hour and a half has gone by and we didn't get to, which means that we will have to have another recorded conversation at some point.
Maybe we'll actually have a thing and I'll not talk about nerdy stuff.
We could do that too.
The whole other side of Anja Keister people.
Well, we got a little bit. I have to say, I did not expect the music history.
Bass jazz.
On that note, I thank you for listening to WEBurlesque. Thank you for finding us on your podcast platform of choice. And this is a thing that every person who has a podcast has to say because it is important. If you have the opportunity to rate, subscribe, and review, that helps us out because this is only the 3rd episode. And you'll help us get to people who need to hear it.
Here's the thing, guys. It's not hard to subscribe to a thing. And then you don't even have to listen to it if you don't want to.
I have podcasts I never listen to.
It'll just accumulate on your iPhone or on something else. And guess what? You're helping a person out. And, like, you don't even have to do anything.
That's true. And of course I do have a Patreon or Patreon. What is it?
Patreon.
Is it Patreon? It's a Patreon, and it's patreon.com/WeBurlesque if you want to throw me a buck.
Do it.
And I'll talk to you a whole lot sooner than this podcast would have it implied, because we're working together in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
At D20 itself.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to a show now. It's because it's New York City. It's 9/10. And there's like 6 shows happening right now. So we'll talk to you soon. And thanks for listening as I wave to the screen that can't see me.
I'm doing the record crackle for you. Nice guy.
The house is etched on my psyche from
yes,
a very, very
that
small
has
age.
kept me up at night. When I was a child, I couldn't get it out of my head,
Yeah.
and it used to scare me to a degree.
Wow.
Because the original British recording, Madame Thénardier, has this voice that's so disarming, and it just makes my hackles go up, and it's so effective. I mean, it's great acting. But she's got this nasty voice about her, and she used to scare the shit out of me. And then I remember I got the big Making of the Musical book, and I remember looking through all of the pictures of the different productions, and the Oslo production of it. Madame Thénardier is so severe, and she's got her teeth all blacked out, and she's laughing as her husband pours the wine. And I just remember looking at that and going, I'm terrified at this. And I couldn't listen to Dog Eat Dog for the longest time. That song, and which is probably one of the best written songs of that show. Scared the hell out of me.
I love any time a show, I think Les Mis did this, introduces a character as a clown and then makes them very serious. Either very like sympathetic and tragic or very scary.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, Thénardier is, I've seen him more or less a clown.
Yeah.
And then he gets, depending on how you play him, he's pretty awful.
Yeah.
I was disappointed. I wasn't mad, but I was disappointed at that the film didn't give them enough time.
Yeah.
I understand that it could have been a 5.5 hour epic, but I think that those characters deserve, because again, they're making a deal. They're villains, and they're terrible, terrible, abusive people, but they're making a deal, and
they're also in, well, both them and Valjean are in extraordinarily challenging circumstances.
Yes.
And they're just adapting in different ways.
And that's the whole point of their final song.
Yeah.
Is that you clear away the barricades and they're still there. And that's the thing, is that they are archetypes, they are representatives of at any barricade throughout history, you clear them away and those types of people will still be there, for better or worse, because society has helped create them. That you've created the miscreant, the villain, the survive by any means possible, by any means, because that's what you've done to your poor. And I think that is reflective of. I think it's nuance that gets ignored, because again they're clowns They're clowns again at the end of the show.
Yeah.
They're in these ridiculous costumes that they don't belong in, but they're probably the most honest characters in that whole show besides Fantine. So, all right. Well, it has been a delight to speak with you, Ludolph Douglas.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being a part of the second episode of WeBurlesque. I will be happy to work with you again and again and again, here, wherever we may find ourselves.
Yeah, likewise.
So we're going to sign off. This is Viktor Devonne. This is WeBurlesque. And we'll see you the next time. Bye.
Bye.